Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Steep Stuff Podcast. I'm your host, James Lariello. And guys, I am so excited for this one. This is our 100th episode and 69th interview. So that means we've done 31 race previews and little sub stuff, tidbits on following the sport. But I am so excited to welcome guest Jason Hardrath onto the podcast for the 100th episode and the 69th interview. Couldn't think of a better guest for this one. Jason is an absolute giant in the sport. The guy has done so many incredible things. We had a really fun conversation. Basically just caught up. I had Jason on a few episodes back to talk about some of the FKTs of the year, and we caught up on what he's been up to since then. We talked about some projects for the future, including some potential infinity loops and highest points in Papua New Guinea and several other massive summits around the world. We got into the debate on influencers versus athletes, which was a fun conversation, and kind of where you fell. Curious to see where you guys fall in that conversation. We talked about FKTs. We talked about the ownership of the FKT and who should own fastestknowntime.com. It is a hot button debate that we dove pretty deeply into. This one is less conversation about performance and more just conversation around the sport and just the influence of the sport and where it's headed and directionally. I hope you guys enjoy this one. Like I said, this is a special one for me, and it really means a lot. So thanks so much for tuning in. None other than the legend himself, Mr. Jason Hardrath.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are live.
People, Earth, listen up. The Steep Stuff Podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Direction USA. I am so excited to be partnering with Ultimate Direction in 2025 as the official hydration solutions partner for the Steep Stuff Podcast. Lots of fun things coming down the pike for this year. Ultimate Direction is going to be unveiling a brand new race and ultra vest that's going to be dropping in the next couple of months. So excited to bring that to you guys. If you are in the market right now for apparel, for a belt, for a new pack, anything hydration solutions related, flasks, you name it, they've got it. They've got you covered. If you hop on to ultimatedirection.com and use code STEEPSTUFFPOD, that's one word, STEEP, STEEP, STUFF, STUFF, POD. If you hop on to ultimatedirection.com and use that code, that's going to get you 25% off your cart. Especially that we're starting to wind our way a little bit more closer to spring. You guys are going to be start to put together your race calendars, and Ultimate Direction's going to have you guys covered. So whatever you need, they've got you outfitted from head almost to toe. They don't do shoes yet. So guys, enjoy yourself. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much, and check out Ultimate Direction. Jason Hardrath, welcome back to the Steep Stuff podcast. How are you, my friend?
Steep stuff, deep stuff tonight. Yeah, we're gonna have some fun chatting. I'm excited to be back.
Oh, dude, I know you're two-time champion of the podcast, man. On for the second time. Excited to finally have you on to talk about. Well, we'll talk about FKTs. We'll talk about all kinds of stuff, but it's fun to tell your story a little bit more and get to dive a little bit deeper into what you've been up to and what's going on, what's new. So, yeah, man, excited to have you on. This has been a long time coming. You know who I chatted with last night? Your buddy Chris Fisher.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
How's he doing?
He's good, man. I think he said he's coming back from Patagonia today. So
Yeah, what a hard life he's living, huh? What a hard life. Just suffering it out in Patagonia right now.
that's where I was going with this, man. Like, what the hell? It must be really nice. Instead, looks like you're at work or finishing up work. I just finished up a work day. The hell are we doing with our lives, dude?
Right. Yeah. I'm sitting here in my PE office and you're wherever you are.
Out of
Yeah.
my living room. Yeah.
Living room. And he's flying back from Patagonia.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
man.
no, it's awesome to see Chris doing so well. He's crushing it around the globe. Him and Aaron.
Yeah.
As we talked about the last time when I was on the show, we talked quite a bit about her and her performances. Super cool to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Definitely still encourage people to follow those two if they're looking for something intriguing to spend spectating their 2025 with.
So true, man. So true. Dude, are you doing, so I saw, did you tell me? I can't remember if I read it in a post or if you told me. You're doing PR now for Aaron. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm kind of doing some media and PR and making some connections. Doing it for a handful of athletes. Nathan Longhurst is another one over there in New Zealand. He's 87 peaks into the 100 peaks of New Zealand now with his crazy climb and fly. So been getting him connected with a bunch of different publications, a bunch of different writers, putting his stuff out, helping get them connected to put a film together when it's done and distribute. Yeah. So then for Aaron, kind of doing some of the same stuff with what she's ready for, and Chris as well.
Dude, I like that. That's a really cool, unique, like, I mean, not that, not saying you do it as a business, but like, I was thinking in my back of my head, I'm like, what a cool thing to do. It's like kind of being an agent, but not, it's a little bit different. It's interesting. I don't know. I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I just decided, for a while I was like, I was in this place where I wasn't as making as big of athlete contracts. Kind of after taking the step down, I mentioned, I think when I was last on the pod, we might have chatted a bit about long COVID and how that affected me.
Yeah.
I actually just recorded an episode with Dirtbag Diaries about long COVID and navigating the pivots and transitions. So it was really fun to get to talk with Fitz, kind of a legend of the whole adventure dirtbag domain in the podcasting realm, to get to kind of chat with him about facing those setbacks. And so I was kind of like sitting and thinking through, man, like, what do I want to do with myself? I've like built up all of these skill sets as an athlete and communicator within the space. Like I'm connected to all of these brands. I'm connected to all these publications and these writers, and I'm connected to these other athletes who are doing rad things. And I just decided to like, you know what? I'm not going to worry about the money right now. I'm just going to add value. I'm going to connect cool people who are living cool stories with people who really want to write about cool stories and people doing cool things and get them published in cool magazines and put out awesome articles. I'm just like, let's just do that. Let's just connect the dots for people. And if it turns into something awesome, and if it doesn't, like, at least I still got to help some stories I cared about get painted into the world a little bit bigger. So yeah, just kind of going for it and seeing what happens.
Dude, I love it, man. I think it's a cool thing, and it's a much needed like area in the space. Like too often do I come across athletes that are like either really good storytellers but have no idea how to like project that out into the world. Like or people that do really incredible things but suck at telling the story or getting it out there, but they're doing awesome shit that like really should be out there in the world, and just being able to maybe bridge that gap or be that middleman, I think there's definitely a necessary space for that, no doubt.
Yeah. If people want to jump into the conversation, I have an even bigger conversation going on LinkedIn. I put a couple of posts out just like, hey, what athletes are out there that, if you were connected with a content creator or a writer, like you feel like you could cover way more ground, and put the same thing out like, hey, content creators that are out there, if you feel like you could tell athlete stories and are interested in relationships with athletes to tell those stories, like get in touch. And it's been a flood. It's been impossible to keep up with so far. How many people have wanted to connect and are interested in doing those kind of partnerships.
Yeah.
So
it's so necessary. I mean, dude, like I can even speak for myself. Like, yes, the podcast arm of the quote unquote podcast or of the media business is like kind of the main thing, but like we all know where this is all going. Like whether you have a podcast or whether it doesn't matter like the way you cover something, like short form videos or long form videos, whichever way you want to do it, like storytelling in a more of a video aspect from a content creation perspective is the way these are all going. Like you see Finn at Single Track, you see Free Trail, you see a lot of these larger brands and what they're specifically doing. And it all comes down to storytelling. Like, yes, the podcast is very important. That's a pillar, if you will. But just as much so, these videos following these athletes to tell these athletes stories is a huge idea. So yeah, that's where I'm going. That's the plan, at least.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, right, a lot of athletes run into hangups where, let's say they do have either they're good at making content themselves or they have someone they can make content with, but then the hangup is like, how do you put that value in front of a brand to actually get people paid for their efforts or get your trip funded? And I think some of the ways you make that have more weight for a brand comes in like, well, what are the ways in which you've already put meaningful story out there? Getting some publications out in written form, getting some written blogs out with brands that you've worked with, even if it's in small ways, getting some podcast episodes out there where you tell the interesting parts of your story and the why behind what you're doing. And I think it all adds up to create sort of this cohesive package around not just accomplishing the thing, but being able to communicate the accomplishment of the thing in a way that resonates with people and makes it something people would want to be a part of.
Yep.
And I think like bridging that gap of the storytelling part and having it be meaningful is it's something where you kind of have to build this through the stepping stones. And a lot of people don't have that like vision and clarity for what to do, and so they just kind of go, I'm just not even going to bother. I'll just run my next race or climb my next mountain.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's really interesting to be playing around with it and seeing what I can do. Who knows? Maybe it'll turn into something, or maybe it'll just be something I do because I care about it.
Yeah, no, I love it. So one of the things, maybe we can unpack this a little bit, because one of the things I really admire about you, and even before you and I had even met each other, and before like when I first found out about you, I think you were on Free Trail and you had this amazing documentary for this huge pursuit that you had done. One thing I really admired about you, dude, and not just your personality, which I really admire, but like you're really good at marketing yourself. Like you're a very good marketer, and I think one of the things that drives me crazy about athletes in the space is that like, listen, I respect it. Like 100% I respect just doing your craft and staying quiet and doing your thing. Like if that's what you want to do, that's totally fine. But I see people that like just want to do their craft and they want to get sponsored or they want to get these accolades. And on the back of that, have a brand recognize them and therefore sponsor them or sponsor a project or whatever. And it's like, I think the train has, or the boat, the proverbial boat has kind of sailed on that a lot, where now you have to be very good at making connections, very good at being able to market yourself, very good at having those conversations. And I think too many people come into the space that expect it to happen in the opposite way, right? It's kind of, I don't know. It's a very tricky thing to me. It's been interesting because, dude, I know so many phenomenal friggin' athletes that deserve to have these huge deals. But it's like, all right, well, is it just because they don't have an Instagram? Like, or maybe they're not as great with the storytelling? I don't know. It's weird.
I mean, to me, and I can be pretty cut and dried with like athletes I mentor and people I work with, athletes I work with. Chris Fisher's one that I've been super real with. It's, if they're trying to go that direction of like, oh, why aren't more brands like seeing what I'm doing? And like, why am I not getting the deals? It's like, okay, you want to go that path? Go beat Walmsley.
Yeah. Yep. There you
go.
Go
Beat Remy. Go beat Killian. Until you've done that, don't whine a single second for not having a big contract. Unless that's what you're doing, like, unless you're taking it to the absolute pinnacle, then brands just aren't that interested, right? If you're below that, like you're lucky for what you're getting. And there are a lot of steps below that where you still have chances to just get in on pure performance alone. But like, don't complain about it unless you're absolutely at the razor edge if you're not trying in any other aspect.
Yep.
And so, like some of the advice I give is, for me, it's always been clear and easy because the thing I've always been the underdog on every team I've ever been a part of. Always the one that had to fight tooth and nail just to hang on to that final point scoring varsity spot, like thinking of like collegiate cross country. And I worked my butt off for it. And it was an honor to work my butt off for it. And I got voted most inspirational by my team because I would show up and work my butt off at workouts. And sometimes, there'd be athletes who would run a minute or two faster than me in a race and they would be dogging behind me. I'm like, I'm here. Like, you be where you're supposed to be. And like I knew my role, and I saw the power in that. I helped members of my team practice more consistently and show up more consistently for the team because I was there. And so that idea of communicating in inspirational ways has always been a part of how I engaged with athletics.
Yeah.
It's a role I've filled on a variety of teams I've been a part of, even back in high school. And so the desire to communicate through sport, and right, I'm a PE teacher. What I do for a living every day is finding the lessons, the life lessons embedded, teamwork and conflict resolution and all these different things that are embedded within the sports that we play and the emotions we feel while we play sports that we care about. And so it's natural for me to be like, of course I want to communicate every bit I can about everything that I do. And it just so happened that like I did enough rad big stuff in the FKT world that people wanted to hear my story. And so I got to communicate some lessons from my own story. And so my encouragement then is like, okay, if you realize that you're not the person that's going to go out and beat Walmsley, then how can you bring a story to the community with what you can do that's of value, that's going to cause others to believe a little bit more, aim a little bit higher, be a little bit better, whether that's in their sport or in their daily life, whatever it might be. And if you can have powerful messages that connect authentically to what you're doing, suddenly there's a much more powerful reason. There's a much more powerful motivation for a brand to be associated with what you're putting into the world.
Yep.
Because it's like, oh yeah, our brand is about like, I think like I partnered with Viore for a summer. Like theirs was the rise, the shine. It was about like, putting in the work and then having your moment to shine because you've put in that work behind the scenes. And it's like, yeah, okay, I've lived that story. Like it's easy and authentic for me to partner with a brand that wants to put out messaging about the rise and the shine. And so, yeah, if you start to put a little bit of intention into the story you're telling and how it serves others, suddenly it can open more doors. But yeah, and unless you're willing to do one or the other, then I don't know. In my opinion, it's like, don't complain.
Yeah.
Don't then complain like, well, why am I not getting more contracts? Da, 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 da. Oh yeah, I can't believe that I'm only getting these like $1,000 contracts and free gear and stuff. It's like, well, what are you actually doing? What's the extra work you're putting in? How are you hustling? What are you producing? And yeah, if you put in the real work and you still don't get it, then it's like, okay, now we can talk.
You got an opportunity to complain. All of these, it's the influencer thing, I think, drives people crazy, where it's like you have to find this like very fine line of being truly authentic to who you are while also pursuing greatness in your craft, right? At least that's the way I view it. Now, people would berate me for this. Some people that I see that do it really well, I think Ali Ostrander does a great job, almost to where borderline, like Rachel Tomjiak is another one that does a phenomenal job at storytelling. Tim Tollefson is in his own way. He makes fun of himself while also, just being truly authentic and sharing his story. You are a great example of it. Aaron Tunn, there's so many people that are really great at it, but it's not like, oh, I'm training for this, or I'm training for you're running the mill half marathon and this is how I do it. It's not this like influencer stuff, if you will. It's more so, you're competing at a very high level, but you're also, making it very authentic for the average person to follow along and get inspired by your story, right? I don't know. Maybe that's controversial, but that's the way I always looked at it, because sometimes the influencer thing drives me crazy, dude.
Yeah. I mean, obviously everything I've just said is kind of speaking more to the athlete that is somewhere toward that higher cutting edge with what they're doing, whether it's the mountain athlete that's doing undone things and advancing to a cutting edge in that regard, or, like the competitor that's chasing after, golden tickets at, canyons or something. It's like you're somewhere toward this upper edge. And I feel like a quote that has always guided me well and served me well is this old Chinese proverb that says, no stream rises higher than its source. And it's speaking of, where are you getting your wisdom from? Where are you seeking your knowledge from? And that really guided me when I was younger. Like, who am I actually listening to advice from? And do they have a life that I would actually care to live. And if their life isn't what I want, then be very wary of the parts of their advice I accept. And then I also flipped it upside down and realized, oh, I need to become the highest possible source of wisdom and value, which means I need to chase back, right? You chase past like, oh, I'm running my first half marathon. I can remember the days that I helped others with the knowledge and stoke that I had because I was running my first half marathon. I can remember the teammates that were stoked and excited and nervous for me as in college when I was like, I'm going to transition up to the marathon this year, guys. They're like, whoa, that's so scary. Because none of us had ever done it before. And it's such a tremendous jump from any track distance that you run. And I ran at the NAIA level. So the marathon was an actual track event for nationals. I'm like, I'm going to try to qualify, guys. And so, right, you when you take those steps, it does matter to a certain portion of people around you. But right, you keep advancing. At least if you're living your life how I believe you ought to, you should always be seeking that next frontier adventure. And the frontier adventure is like a journey for your own growth and your own experience, your own struggle, your own memories, your ability to look in the mirror and be proud of yourself down the road for what you did with your life and the fears that you faced and the challenges that you undertook, the decisions you made. But then also, it gives you more value to help others who are advancing further in their own frontier adventures of life, their own journey. And so, right, I'm in a place with mine that I can be the one that's helping people who are taking on 100 peak projects halfway around the world from me. Because I've faced my own big projects here domestically and halfway around the world. And so can I really speak as clearly to those first-time marathoners as I used to? No, that's kind of a ways back in the rearview mirror for me now. It's over a decade back. I don't have as much authentic value. Someone else who's new to the marathon should have the opportunity to inspire those people. So I guess in a way I don't poo-poo the people that are like, I'm running my first marathon and stoking a bunch of people up on it. Because it's like, awesome. Oh, that's where they're at in their journey. Yeah. That's the value they have to add. And I'm out here helping people that are doing 100 peak projects. So yeah, it's just, to me, it's like, that's the proper journey. It's always sort of a circle. It's always a circle back. Like whatever level you're at, you're always turning around and now going, who can I help with what I just did?
Yeah.
Who does this matter to?
That, but this is something I was thinking about.
I think there is an important distinction here. It's like, I always applaud someone living, right? To me, it's, I mentioned that sort of circling back cycle where you make a bold decision to chase something, and maybe you make your small community, your running club, your few friends aware that you're going to run so let's say your first 5K even. Right. And they're like, whoa, that's so cool. Da, da, da. Right. Instantly sort of raises your importance and the attention that you get. And your importance and your influence, let's say. And then you go through the training process. If you're doing it right, you don't stop there. Some people just say stuff and then never follow through, right? Because they're addicted to like saying they're going to do something and just getting that attention and that importance. And then they don't follow through. And we all start to see those people like, okay, yeah, this guy's talking again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, right, let's say you do follow through. You go run that 5K. And everybody's proud of you and everybody congratulates you. And then someone else new comes to the group who says, well, I might want to run my first 5K. And you have a chance to speak into their life and add value, right? Because you just did that thing. And so then what should happen, right? If everything is working as it should, you should then yourself be looking toward your first 10K, right? Now you've started the journey again for yourself while you're simultaneously helping the person that's going for their first 5K. And I think where we start to view influencers negatively is when clearly they're just sitting at a spot that like there's no real growth. They're just like milking the same sort of like easy casual half marathon that they've done, but they're talking it up as if it's this huge dramatic thing and overselling it. And I think, right, those of us that have like pursued the bigger things can kind of see that and be like, yeah, I can tell that that's manufactured drama.
Yeah. To get people to like look at me.
The authentic growth.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a tightrope, man. I don't know. It's something I've contemplated this for a very long time, and it's funny. I very rarely talk about this in the podcast, just because like I don't ever like to poo poo on anybody, and I don't want to make anyone feel any bad of a way. Obviously, there's that 0.05% of people that might be listening that are influencing, and maybe hey, give me your feedback. Let me know what you think, because I'm sure there's a lot of hard work that might go into that. It's totally possible. I don't know. It's just interesting. And I think it's also, dude, on the sponsorship level, it makes things very interesting. Because I brought this up earlier. I said, not that I'm kind of all over the place with this conversation, but I brought this up earlier when we were talking about sponsorship. And, like you have to view yourself in this day as a brand. You have to have, a lot of people have Substacks. That's starting to get super, some people have podcasts. Some people have a very large social media following, and they're able to convey their story in a very, really like genuine, organic level. But it's where the influence, and I think that there was a really good Trail Runner article that came out about this recently. That was more so about at what point the influencer takes the opportunity away from the athlete. And there's this like push and pull and tug and, back and forth. Because each one has their own place in the space, right? Or so to speak, depending on the way you look at it. So it's like this, back and forth on who's taking opportunities away from who and how athletes view that. I don't know. Obviously, I'm more on the side of the athlete because I am one, and as you are, so it makes it a little awkward. But it's like it's interesting. It's an interesting place in the sport, like because how brands view things and how they value things.
Yeah, no, I mean, right. I can look at it from the space of being the kid who would run the PE mile hard even when I showed up sick with the flu that day, right? I think that, right, in a way, I can relate stuff back to what does a person do in the PE mile? And it's like most human beings, you look at most PE classes, all of us can think back to a PE class we had. Most people in every class are trying to walk every step they possibly can if they don't get an F or get in trouble. They're trying to do as little as they can to get by. And then you have this select few that for no reason at all, they want to run their guts out and get the fastest time they possibly can. They want to get as much as they possibly can. They want to go as far as they possibly can. And that's a much smaller percentage of the population. And that's still a percentage of the population that adds up when you think of, okay, every graduating class of every year stacked on top of each other of all the people who are still alive, there's those people that have that mindset. Let's say it's 5 per class of 30. It's like that's a decent chunk of people that we're speaking to when we talk about these messages of cutting edge and rising to the top and pushing for the next few seconds and bettering an FKT and like, right, those people just naturally from all the way back in childhood resonate with that message. They're moved by that message of advancement, of growth. And I think some people come into that as their mind matures later in life, caring about that. But then you still just have this much more massive portion of the population that we're just trying to get them to not completely walk and drop out of every aspect of life. Like show up for yourself, contribute something, believe in yourself, accomplish something that you're proud of. Instead of always getting the F, like do the thing that, that feels like you're rising above. And we're trying to invite people into this different way of thinking and different way of being that not only makes them better for themselves, but them better for the people around them too, even if it's just in a small way. And like, to me, I do think that there is immense value in that. And so, right, whether you're speaking to the casual participant that's just trying to like one of the things that happened when I was a young personal trainer, I personal trained for a couple of years before I became a teacher, because I had this really cool teacher that offered the certification as part of a course she taught. And I was like, cool, I'm going to do that. And one of the most meaningful ones, I got to work with some cool athletes and this and that, help people work on their vertical leap or sprinting. But the coolest one was an overweight dad who just wanted to be able to play with his kids. Oh, I was so motivated to work with that guy.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's just like, dude, yes, let's get you back to where you can play with your kids. And so that like little things like that sort of keep me calibrated in the world, like, because it's easy for me to get off. All of my friends are high achievers that are chasing, I mentioned Nathan, I mentioned Chris, I mentioned Aaron, right? There's you, like just like cutting edge people, just doing things that very few other human beings who've ever lived could do. And so it's easy for me to just get caught up in that. and lose sight of all of the rest. But I think PE teaching and then some of these like foundational memories with other people who are just like in the struggle of regular societal life, it's like, oh, those stories matter too, and connecting on that level matters too.
Yeah.
So I can see it. I can see it sort of like through the tiers and the systems, and I do see the struggle back and forth of like, well, shouldn't the money go to like the greatest accomplishments in running and the greatest accomplishments on the track and the greatest accomplishments in the mountains? It's like I do think there should always be some amount of money for those truly cutting edge, but at some point you have to get honest with yourself and say, I'm not the one beating Walmsley.
Right.
I'm not the
Right.
one doing a world first. I'm not the one exploring the unexplored. I'm just trying to run a race that everybody else runs and get in the top 10. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe that's not quite as unique as it used to be. Maybe there's some other story to be told that's more valuable. And yes, maybe you can be the person that tells that story. But also like you got to weigh up against all of these sort of stories and impacts that matter.
It's an interesting, dude, have you ever thought about being an athlete manager?
You know, in a way, it's sort of like at the edges of what I'm dabbling at. I would be psyched. I would be psyched, I think. I think I could do a really good job with an athlete manager role.
I really do. I really value the way you view, just the space and things like that. Like you understand the way the thing, you understand who's who and you understand the way things work. It's interesting.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Definitely.
If anybody's hiring,
get that in your ear a little bit. Yeah, you'd be a sick athlete manager, dude. I mean, listen, I know some athlete managers, and like, yeah, I definitely think you would definitely rank pretty high amongst them. So, oh man. So, dude, what else is going on these days? What's are you starting to get together some summer plans for summer vacation? Like, what do you got? What do you got on the docket as we start to push towards spring?
Let's see here. What do I got going on? I guess in the right here and now, I finally released some footage from the first Ojos del Salado infinity loop attempt. So that just released on my YouTube. If people want to go look it up and
put that in the
see some amazing trials and tribulations of some incredible athletes trying to go put an infinity loop on a 6,800 meter peak down in South America with only 6 days of acclimatization. You can go find that on my YouTube. And yeah, that was, kind of a part of the big project of the Journey to Infinity project. I did Pico de Orizaba with Nathan and took this team down and attempted Ojos, the tallest in South America. And I might be pulling one of those out and dusting it off over the summer. There's one over in Papua New Guinea, of the Volcanic Seven Summits list, for those who don't know about the project. It's an attempt to put an infinity loop on each of the world's, the tallest volcano on each continent. And so there's one over in Papua New Guinea that I think would be really rad and super. I mean, if anybody knows anything about Papua New Guinea, it's wildly undeveloped and kind of tribal. And it's not so much the mountain that's difficult there. It's going to be the experience of moving through the land and the people on the land that makes that one a wild adventure where I don't know what might happen. So I might dust that off. I definitely am super psyched up on the Speedmo movement, the Speedmo events and movement within the paragliding community. Speedmo is short for speed mountaineering, but it also has embedded in it a type of flying within paragliding called speed flying, where you fly a smaller wing much more aggressively and faster. And these smaller wings give you the ability to like launch and land in places in the mountains that you can't really do with a full-size paraglider. And so you can kind of use it for the purpose of moving through the terrain and on the terrain more efficiently, as opposed to most paragliders, you just kind of catch thermals and fly above the terrain. So I'm kind of psyched up on some projects domestically and foreign potentially. I'm working on a paragliding project over to the UK with Athletic Brewing because they're expanding over there, and I kind of read the lay of the land. Right, that's something I think if you want to be a higher level athlete, you got to look at the lay of the land of the brands that you want to work with. What do they care about? Where do they care about growing? What are the activations they're putting out there? And go, okay, what's something I can do that works in conjunction to support what they're actually doing and what they care about, where their attention is right now, instead of saying, hey, look at what I want to do. go, hey, there's something I could do over there that I would, I've been wanting to go to Europe and paraglide over there since I pulled a wing up. So it's like, heck yeah, I'll go to the UK for a few weeks and fly some of the most beautiful places and see some cool stuff and meet some cool people. So working on something there for the summer and might do a big uh, kind of Speedmo FKT effort on some more notable things in that direction.
Nice, dude.
Um, so that's in the works. That's in the pipeline. Um,
I gotta get you hooked up with my buddy George Foster. Shout out to George. He's a amazing fell runner slash trail runner slash mountain runner that lives in the UK. He's up a bit further north. He's not quite in the Scotland area, but I think he's a little bit further north. Near the Bob Grand Round is where he lives. But dude, like, I got to get you guys hooked up. He'll show you some sick shit to jump off of and fly away from.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. I would love any connections anybody has in the UK. And yeah, then I'll probably bounce and spend some time floating around in literally and figuratively floating around in France, and I want to bump up and fly some stuff in Norway. So yeah, it should be a cool trip. Um, yeah, yeah, I got a few ideas percolating there.
That'll be a six. And dude, I just love, like, I think there's so many opportunities there for like great storytelling and just like really sick films. Like, I don't know. I don't want to get, the cart ahead of the horse or blow any or, spray on any ideas that you might have. But like, I don't know. I just find myself like we talked about in the other podcast that we did, like how sick that video was of like Cedar and a couple other climbers like stumbling their way up Pico de Orizaba and then paragliding off the top. And I was like, that is really cool. So like, I don't know. I just think there's an opportunity for content like that. I think people would find that genuinely interesting and pretty badass,
Yeah, I think, right, the people that are, again, I think back to those who like to run the mile hard and those who just want to walk as much as they can. I think the people that are going to do the most interesting stuff with paragliding are the people who are coming from a background of running, because we already just love moving fast in the mountains just for the sake of itself. And then you give us a 1.5 kilogram flying setup to increase our efficiency and add to the fun we have that day. It's like, cool. Like, I can use this tool versus the person that never wants to run a step or walk uphill at all. Like, they're going to want to get driven to the top of the thing and they're going to want to fly as long as they can and then just land and be done for the day. I think all of the interesting undone pioneering is going to be by people who, oh, cool, the flight only went for 5 miles instead of 10. I'll just run the 5 and still continue with the project. I think that's kind of the interesting undone space within the sport. And it's definitely over here, the wild, wild west, as far as that goes. There's so much undone terrain to be covered in a unique way.
And there's so many peaks, man, to do that shit off of. I don't know. Like, there's just, I don't know. I feel like there's unlimited ideas and unlimited inspiration to do stuff. I do want to circle back to Papua New Guinea. Like I said, I don't want to blow up your spot on that, but I am like, have you done a ton of research into that volcano? Like, I'm just so curious because every time I've heard of someone wanting to go there, which has been very limited, they've been significantly like the constraints of navigation and then the danger of the peoples that live there has put significant constraints on it, which is interesting because if you could pull off something like that, you'll be one of very few,
I'm lucky enough to be kind of embedded with a few people in the peak bagging community, the mountaineering community, that have done some very interesting things in the name of getting some peaks bagged, potentially like illegally crossing borders to get to certain peaks and make things happen. And so being tied in with people who have that kind of ingenuity and are willing to dive that deep really helps. So I have a few of those people in my hip pocket to chat with who to know. And yeah, right. A big part of it is, do you have the right people as boots on the ground to, when you're there in country, to help you get the project done? Because if, they know who to pay off and who to talk to and who to woo and convince, then yeah, you're good to go.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, that one is interesting. Like I said, on that, it's the people. It's the people and being able to cross the land that's the interesting part, not the technicality or those sort of difficulties.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, dude, last time we spoke, I told you the thylacine is running around there. The Tasmanian tiger, they think the extinct. We'll get into aliens and Fermi paradox and shit in a little bit, but like the since we're talking about wild animals and shit like that, the Tasmanian tiger might still very well live there. For those of you who might be interested in like wild animal stuff, there's a old Discovery show that I watch on Discovery Plus all the time called Extinct or Alive that is narrated by this guy Forrest Gallant. Dude, it is my wife, it drives her crazy because I have it on all the time. She's like, can you turn this off? And it's basically this guy going around the globe like looking for extinct animals. It's so interesting. Anyway, I don't know how I got off on a tangent there. But yeah, dude, the Papua New Guinea thing is sick. That would be amazing. But I'd be, very interested to follow around along that. I do want to circle around the topic though of like paying people off, finding the right guides, people to get you to these places that are very difficult, right? Have you had to deal with that much in other projects in the past?
Not to the same degree that I perceive it to be for this one. I haven't been in those more tense or war-torn or corrupt places that it's like you're actually worried about it. But I mean, there've been a little bit of it where like knowing the right people who like know where you can and can't get a vehicle to or things like that. There's been like smaller, tamer versions of it in some things that I've done. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I've dipped my toe, so to speak.
I like it. I like it. Have you spoken to have you podcast wise done? I'm just curious. Have you spoken to extent on the Ojos de Salada project? Because I feel like we've glossed over it and talked a little bit about it, but I'm not really sure. Have you spoken on any podcasts about in depth about it? Because I'm very curious. I want to know like how that project went, like how dude, the acclimatization period seemed bananas. Like I'm just so curious about so many aspects of that.
Oh, sure. Let's dive into it. I may have chatted just cursory overviews on a few, and I think Emily. I kind of passed the mic off to Emily and Hannah for some opportunities to speak about it. What's cool is Hannah's going to get to talk to a kids climbing group and show the film and chat about how climbing can lead to getting to see the world, which is I love it when opportunities like that happen. Anyways, yeah, why not? Let's jump into it a little bit. Man.
Because you had reached out to me. I remember, I mean, I don't know if I don't think I've ever told anybody this. You had reached out to me originally when you were putting a team together and you asked me if I'd be interested. And I couldn't get the time off during December to do it. And I just remember being so bummed. I was like, this is a once in a lifetime experience. What was it like putting together this team of, it's like assembling the Avengers, bro. Like you had Aaron, you had Chris, like you had everybody out there. Like what was that like? And then, you got to remember, these are all athletes. Athletes have different personalities. What was it like assembling the team and then like working together with people with, I don't want to say egos, but like everybody's got their own goals of what they want to do, right? So what was it like putting together a team and then being able to get the groups of these people to function as a team?
Bro, it basically, right, if you think about the different Avengers films and how it played out between those big characters, I mean, to some degree, it was kind of like that. It was these big personalities, and right. So I assemble this group. I reach out to these, through the channels that I have. Like you said, you got an invitation. If you ever get a Jason Hardrath invitation, don't expect it to be an easy trip.
Yeah, and don't turn it down.
You'll only regret it for the rest of your life. But yeah, the ones who said yes. It was full on, right? Even though they were all athletes in their own right. Like, right, Emily, 200-mile athlete, just did the whole 2 million feet of vert in a year thing. Like she's a quality ultra endurance runner. Hannah had done a bunch of stuff in the alpine and ice climbing and a lot of experience in that domain. Not so much as an ultra runner, right? So like definitely like gaps, and it was the highest elevation anybody on the team had been to, myself included. So we were like all of us blowing the lid off that experience. Chris had done the winter 14ers and made his attempt on the summer 14ers and, the stuff he's done, anybody that's followed his FKT journey. But he hadn't done any high altitude. All of his stuff in the Himalaya, summiting an 8,000-meter peak, came as a springboard effect of having like gotten thrown into this trip and like having the experience he had. So, talk about a cool positive outcome, stuff I care about, right? Springboarding an already high level athlete into even higher level stuff. Helped him connect with Tyler Andrews, and they've gone crazy over in the Himalaya. And then brought Andrew Okerlinder along, a young kind of mentee of mine who'd like followed in my footsteps, completing the Bulgars in a season as just this like college student who did it in a summer. Just super cool to see him. And I was like, okay, like I'm going to try to get some sponsor money to cover you to come along and get to have this experience. And so, yeah, this amalgamation of these personalities and people and experience levels and all of us following this like crazy acclimatization plan where we're all doing as much pre-acclimatization, whether that's sleeping in an altitude tent for 5 weeks before leaving, or people who were like Chris living as high as he could in Colorado and summiting 14ers each day until the trip went right, because this is in the winter. It's our winter up here, so that it's summer down there, so it's like kind of a challenge. So we're all like leaning into some level of discomfort and difficulty to like show up as prepared as we can. And right, we have this tight window, and everybody on the team, I got some kickback, some resistance from some people in the mountaineering community, like, oh, as the trip leader, like, why would you make a decision that put your team at risk like that? Like, why didn't you just extend the trip? And me, I was kind of stuck as a school teacher. But also all of them kind of agreed to it because it was this intense, difficult, but also a little bit easier on the budget, right? Everybody's money was tight, as athletes' money is. And it's like, oh, like I only have to take off work for this smaller amount of time and be gone for this smaller amount of time for my other commitments. Like I actually want that. I want to gamble. I want to run the experiment. Those were just the kind of people I drew in. Not a single one of them's like, hey, could we extend for an extra month so that we can be more prepared? All of them are like, sick, let's do it. And so, yeah, we show up and we lean into this challenge and have basically, 10 days on the ground from the time we land to like also getting back to the plane to fly back, to try to pull off this crazy 40-mile push where we're, at the lowest point, not coming below 17,000 feet, Jesus. And at the highest point being at 22,800 feet. Yeah, just like full on. And
bananas.
Each day, different people sort of got peeled at the seams. And I would be like getting peeled at the seams, right? Like not hardly sleeping from the altitude and like headaches and, not having an appetite and having to like force eating anyways. And then I would have to like, try to mitigate sort of these either self spirals or disagreements between personalities. We had some people that were more conservative and concerned and some people that were more cavalier and go for it. At one point, two of our creatives that were on the trip almost got in a fight over something. So there's just like a lot of like people just getting kind of boiled down by the sheer intensity of this acclimatization, like pushing a human body to adapt to altitude that fast. So like, would I do it again that way? Probably not. No, definitely lesson learned. But like, what an experience. And the fact that every single person on the team stood on the summit within 6 days of being on the ground was such a cool thing, even though we did not succeed at putting the infinity loop on the ground there on our first try. So yeah, just this crazy unfolding of story and crazy clashing of personalities and mindsets and approaches and like all of that still working out for the team to sort of be proud of what they accomplished and like carrying it as a badge of honor and a stepping stone, a springboard into other things they've gone and done. Yeah, it was a cool trip. Super intense to manage, very full on. Definitely learned a lot of lessons as a leader and as a person.
I think you were the best like team leader for this because you're like a teacher. and like you deal with kids all the time, so you must have insane patience, man. Like to be able to deal with people, or just like really, I don't know. Like I don't know if I could deal with a lot of children. So like you must have like patience of steel then.
I don't know. I guess a person that's patient wouldn't really know. I definitely have my boundaries. I have my own rough edges for sure, but I think all things considered, and I would hope, knock on wood, that if you interviewed every single other member of the team, which I guess you could do, they would agree that all things considered, like we managed pretty well, and I managed the team pretty well for what we went there and faced and the problems we had to solve on the ground. And people over each given day sort of pivoting on what they were and weren't going to do, like who was actually going to attempt the infinity loop and who wasn't, and who, what roles people would still be willing to play or what they wouldn't be willing to do based on how their bodies were feeling and what that meant for the team. There's a lot of like moving parts. A lot of agreements had to be reached for how to sort of continue to keep the dream alive of the project still happening. Um, yeah, it was really interesting to navigate. It was really interesting to navigate.
That's cool, man. I'm sure just like such a learning experience for the future, for future projects, you'll understand like, how do I put this together? How much time do I need? Who doesn't bump well with others, or, how does that work? It's like, I don't know. It's interesting, because that plays such a role into, success, is getting people to function as a team and being able to work together for different, when they have different goals. So it's interesting. Very cool. Very cool project. And the fact that you got everybody up there and like at some point in time, each person was able to stand on the summit is like within 6 days or whatever is bananas, dude. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. I mean, yeah, it speaks to the drive of each person. It speaks to what each person was willing to do, to show up prepared with the modalities they were able to follow that fit with their life and being willing to actually commit to those. Um, yeah, definitely a cool thing when you think about how it's hard to get some people to like show up to work. Um, and here I have this whole crew of people that are like going above and beyond to do things that made their life really inconvenient and difficult, right? Like sleeping for 4 or 5 weeks in a tent, right? That puts some tension on your home life.
Yeah, no, for sure.
um, it's like there's a lot of layers to this that it's like, wow, what an incredible thing to have that number of people fully bought in to like go give something a go.
Yeah. Dude, I love your expectations on people too, because I feel like, I don't know, like one of the things you just said was like, oh, well, going at, and this is just personality wise how we're different. Like, you said like there's some people that like don't even show up to work. I don't even think like that. I like automatically hold people. This is terrible. I hold people to like the highest of standards because I hold myself to the highest of standards, which is really unhealthy. It's not good at all. But like, I don't know. I feel like it's your expectations for all those athletes has to have, you have to have a certain level of expectation for all those athletes, especially out there. Cause like, I don't know what happens if you were to have done the full infinity loop or on your way. And if you get to the backside, right? And it's like, what happens if one or two people have to bail? And it's like, and there's like, you're super far from rescue. It's like, what do you do at that point? Do you all just bail, or just X amount of people continue? Like, how does that even work?
Yeah, those were all like real-time conversations we had to have, and we had to talk about, right, the opportunity cost of making an even slightly bad call, right? Like the difference it would make to the rest of the team if a person chooses to just turn around and go down at the summit because they're done versus they drop off the backside and then decide they're done. And it's like, no, like you don't, like no one gets that option.
Yeah.
If you think there's even a chance you're not fully bought in, it ends before you drop into the committing backside. And yeah, so it was a lot of like, right. And it was that there was a lot of high expectations once it's boots on the ground. And I think that's something I'm good at. I'm good at pivoting and oscillating and being understanding on different levels and like bringing the right intensity and expectation to the right level. Like, when you're a person that does stuff in the mountains where your decisions can kill your friends and your friends' decisions can kill you, there's not wiggle room for I felt this or I felt that. It's like, no, you do or you do not. You like perform. You show up, you're mentally present, you do everything to the best of your ability. You make the very best decisions as honestly as you possibly can. Um, and so I understand that like high level, high expectations, high intensity. Um, but I think right, the years of teaching allows me to be like, oh, well, you're not holding my life in your hands right now. But let's talk about how I'm going to be different and how it's a different decision when we are. Let's talk about that. I'm going to let you know very clearly and concisely what it's going to be like and what my expectations are for that moment, how I want you to show up in that moment. But right now it's like, we're not in that. Like, this is chill and fine. Like, do what you need to do. And if you, right, I like I think I said this on the last episode too. I like the Mel Robbins philosophy, let them.
Yeah.
Right. It's like somebody wants to show up fully prepared. Cool. I will bring them along and I will trust them as a part of my big projects. If somebody wants to like half-ass stuff and not fully show up, it's like, hey, I mean, you can come be there and play a supporting role, but you're not doing the effort and putting the group at risk.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mind being that guy and making those calls that are uncomfortable and make people unhappy with me. I make kids unhappy with me on a daily basis because they want to try to do things to their classmates that is like, no. I would not be a good human being if I let other human beings do that sort of stuff to other people. And you wouldn't like the world if I was allowed and let myself do that sort of thing to you. So think about that. And right, I'm willing to be intense with people when the time calls for it, but also I'm willing to like be lighthearted and enjoy it and let people go wherever they care to go with their life.
I love it, dude. I want to pivot a little bit. I want to get away from Ajusta Salada and move to I want to talk a little bit about FKT. And the reason I asked this question, I've been so curious to ask you this question. And this one might take you a little by surprise. And you can answer it. You don't have to answer it. I'm just kind of curious. Being like having had so many FKTs and so many high profile FKTs, you did a lot of these during like the Buzz and Peter Backlund era, right? And then FKT was sold to Outside. And I know you and I have had, I wouldn't say disagreements, we've had conversations, around like FKT and like its place in the sport now, especially given like the backlash, like in the aftermath of like the Michelino thing, like they had to make some hard calls and make some changes. What do you think it was a net positive for them to be bought by Outside and like be under the new leadership? I'm just so curious. I don't think I've ever asked you this, and I want to hear how people have to say about it, because I'm not a big supporter of Outside owning FKT. I don't like it personally.
I'm going to lean in slowly to my mic and say this for those that can't see this. Has anyone in any of the niches that's been bought up by Outside been happy
Yeah.
with what has happened? I think you go look on any threads about when they bought, what was it, Pink Bike, or when they bought Backpacker, or when they bought, right? It's kind of the same story. And I realize they're trying to do their best with this like corporate conglomerate model, but all in all, do I think it was the best thing for that niche, that brand, that movement in our sport to be sort of owned by a bigger corporate entity? No, I think it stole and slowed down, right? Because they're not willing to put money into it. It stole and slowed down a lot of the momentum and changes and interfaces, ways the community could have been involved both on a social level and things that could have gotten done with how athletes got recognized per se on routes and things. And they're starting to get a little momentum going again, but I think it actually killed a lot more of the momentum for a long time than what was going on, even when it was just Buzz and Peter. And I think it lost a little of its spirit in that time as well. And right, because an FKT used to sort of be a little bit hollowed ground, like you're going to do something big and audacious and difficult. And I don't know if a lot of the FKTs on there now evoke that sort of a spirit.
It's gotten
A
very
spirit
saturated.
yeah, it got very saturated. And right, it's that twofold thing, right? It's the same thing you hear people talking about from the business end of outdoors right now. It's like, oh, it's like, how do you cater to both the casual participant and the high level athlete? And I think there's ways that could have been done better in the language, in the website structure, and a variety of things where there could have been more involvement for the casual person to go and play at these elite routes and these renowned routes, and feel like they were involved in contributing and ticking them off, and they could see their progress. I think there were ways to format it so there could have been more involvement, but again, Outside wasn't willing to put any money into the website, to create that sort of space and interface. And so the only option to get involved if you couldn't, beat a higher level athlete was to do something increasingly more derivative. And there's still a lot of spaces where it is the wild, wild west with FKT, less so seemingly in the States now. But internationally, there's still a ton of places where there are absolutely beautiful routes that have never been truly time trialed, truly tested in a clean push. And so I think there's still a lot of places you can travel and do very authentic, very true to the spirit, huge, harrowing FKT pushes, or even short, intense FKT pushes on something that's like world class. But yeah, as far as the European and North American scene, particularly to the US, it seemed like stuff's sort of gotten watered down. And I think some of us have sensed that, and a lot of people have voiced frustration and concern. I know poor Allison, who runs the social media, has been saturated with hateful,
and Allison's a great person.
Messages. Yeah, she's wonderful. She's awesome. I love working with Allison.
Absolutely. And Tate, like dude, after our podcast, I had so many people just reach out to me and provide, because we had a nice significant conversation about the Michelino situation with the Grand. And then, we talked about Tyler Andrews and that whole thing on Elbert, and then Aaron God damn it. If I got to pronounce it. One of these days, I'm sorry, Aaron. One of these days I'll get your last name correct. Ton. You think it's like the easiest thing to pronounce. Anyway, I had so many people reach out to me just to provide, from FKT, to provide commentary. And, they were really kind and very, they're just like, keep doing what you're doing. We really they were very appreciative that we were talking about it. And it bothers me and just makes me upset because even Jack had said it on Finn's podcast. He was like, I really thought FKT would be a bigger thing by now. I thought it would be much, much bigger and much more of a thing, and it's kind of stagnated. And the reason I bring this up is because I've been mulling over this for a while. I think it should be athlete owned and athlete ran, and I wonder because Outside's not doing too hot. I wonder if there's a possibility, for a group of
a buyback scenario,
of a possibility to purchase it. I know Jack, and this was just through the grapevine. I don't know Jack personally. You try to get me connected. If Jack ever happens to hear this, hey, let's talk. There was a possibility of Jack approaching to try to get a group together to buy it. Dude, at this point in time right now, I think I could get together a group and probably go after it and buy it and see if we could, get a...
I actually at one point had a private funder who was willing to pay up to a certain rather large sum of money.
They wouldn't sell, right?
No, their number was a bit too high. We knew it was significantly higher than what they bought it for. And they hadn't put any value into it, so we weren't willing to just sort of hand away that for nothing.
Well, and not to go after them and not to make us think about it, but my thing is and this is my background in corporate finance. There's no money being made. Really, there's not where's your cash flow generation? If they really want to sell something for such a high amount, is it just the trademark name that they want so much money for? I'm just so curious. So I'd love, and I'd invite if not Alice, I'm sorry, if who's the outside guy? I can't remember his name. We're friends on LinkedIn. If I'll call him out. If he ever hears this and wants to have a conversation, I'd love to get a group together to have that conversation just to see if anybody would be willing to sell it and we could make it athlete owned,
And I even presented an idea, but they just didn't have the bandwidth to even consider it, is what if there was a separate entity, sort of like the what is it? The Trail Runner Association, or I forget the exact acronym.
PTR,
but like
PTRA, yeah.
Yeah, so a separate like FKT association that like this is the ratification of the record and the management of the rules and the policies and all that. That's athlete ran. That's like has a not a council. Gosh, my brain is farting after a long day of teaching. Board of directors,
more or less.
Right. So it's like people who are involved in the sport and invested, and they're speaking into the direction of the sport and the growth of the sport and sort of shaping decision making. And then like a corporate entity like outside could own the marketing aspect of the storytelling from FKT. So like we wouldn't have to buy the whole thing, right? If they still wanted that piece of the pie where it's like, well, we get to tell the stories, or we get to have first dibs on the stories coming out of this and the brand association coming out of this. But okay, you guys run your own thing and we don't have any control over decisions that don't get made on the website or FKT policies or this or that. It's not our employees making those decisions.
You just gave me a brilliant idea on that. Like, I don't know the corporate structure, if it's S Corp, C Corp, or LLC. I mean, I did do some digging a while back. From what I understand, it's an LLC. But with that said, like, before I go, I don't want to go too deep into this, but like, if they were to make it, what I think would be the optimal structure, just because the business itself from a monetary perspective should not, I think it should be built in a way where it's a nonprofit, where it's a 501c3, and whatever money is given to it, however they raise funds, they can use that to invest back into the volunteers that are doing, giving their hard-earned time, maybe the one or two employees that they have, and then the rest of it should go to support up-and-coming FKT athletes and then existing FKT athletes for projects and stuff like that, which I think would be awesome, and then have it managed by a board of directors. And that, like, just like, dude, same thing. Like, I'm on the board for the Pikes Peak Marathon, and like, no employees of the Pikes Peak Marathon are on that board of directors. It's a board of independent people that manage a 501c, it's basically managing a 501c3, which is a nonprofit. So it'd be interesting to see it managed in that way, just because like, the finance brain in me does not understand how they make any money. I don't get it. It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. Like, there's no tangible cash flow there from like of true value for them to want such a high number for just the fastest known time website. I don't get that. So yeah, I don't know. I would challenge them to maybe consider reorganizing that structure and making it just a nonprofit, and then having it managed by a group of someone like you, Chris Fisher, Aaron, like people that really Jack, people that like really fucking care and like want to see this thing grow and want to do right by it. Like, that's what it should be. Who should be the people managing it.
Right. And those are going to be the kind of people that can rally, right? If improvements to be made on the website or things like that improve interface. I've thought, there should be some user interface aspects of Mountain Project that allow you to tick off routes that you've done and rate routes, give it a star system. And right, then we sort of have this like natural user generated ranking of routes, so that you could see what the quality routes in a given area are, based on the people who've done them and the people that live there, and have it be visually apparent on the website. It'd go above and beyond simply listing some premier routes.
Yeah.
Some things like that, right? Then you could be like rally the troops, so to speak, where it's like, oh yeah, no, I know Josh, or I know Jack, or I know James. Like, I'll put in some programming time to improve this thing. Like, just kind of group source what needs to be done, instead of it being like, okay, let's run this up the corporate ladder to see if they'll sign off on a $100,000 change. Right. Some of that stuff could actually happen just on sheer connections and personality. If everybody didn't feel like, oh, I'd be giving away my time to a corporate entity to improve their profits.
Right. Right. And like nobody loves outside right now. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, like, I don't know. I've seen so much, and not to shit on them, but I've just seen so much negative stuff recently with layoffs and just really poor mismanagement from a managerial perspective. And that, whatever, that's their ball game. However they want to play that, that's fine. Listen, that once you create a conglomerate, or however you want to call it, a private equity system to where like they hold all of these companies, like it is very difficult to manage something like that. Like I had firsthand knowledge and I totally understand it. But that said, something like FKT, because I truly view FKT as one of, if not the soul of the sport. I've heard it described many times like that. And I truly agree with that. I get kind of wonky with it owned by, a corporation that at the end of the day is searching for profitability. And we all know how that goes, right? Whereas like, and I do want to give some credit to my good buddy, Brad Barrett, Arc'teryx athlete, one of my training partners and one of my best friends. He was the one who said to me originally, he's like, man, that's a really good idea. But he's like, why don't you it should be designed in a way where you're able to give back to athletes, where you're able to help support, like, in some ways, like support athletes that are going after these big things. Like, let's say someone wants to go try and take a crack at Tara Dower's ATFKT. Good luck with that. But here's some support to be able to do that, things like that, where you're able to kind of sponsor and bring up a new group of people to get them excited about it. So whether there is an alternative pathway to the racing scene, if you will,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And those are ideas that, again, you're not presenting anything new to me. Yeah. These are all ideas that I tried to work on, and I talked with a private sponsor about who was interested in this whole thing. And like, oh yeah, if we were a nonprofit, like we could also have this aspect where we were, because he's interested in doing, he's one of the sponsors that's supporting Nathan with his huge project down in New Zealand right now. And it's like we could do more of this stuff where when an athlete is willing to take on an incredible story, not only do we sort of support them so financially they can do it, but also like help build out the story around them in a way that they don't know how to themselves, so that the inspiring story does get told in a big way.
Yeah.
And we could have this whole thing, but nobody's willing to do that kind of work, again, if it's just helping out a corporate profit margin.
Yeah. I've even thought about approaching Dylan and Finn to see if we could pull together, just like make it owned by the podcasts, and spread it out. I've had so many ideas for what the hell to do with this thing, but like it just drives me crazy. And I definitely think a leader, some sort of change is needed to give it that spark for the future, and to have more people. Cause like, dude, it was really disheartening to hear Jack say, oh man, I really thought it would be bigger and better. And I was like, oh man. And he's like one of the poster children athletes for FKT. Like half the reason people know about FKT is because of you and because of him, it's kind of crazy. And now Tara Dower, all these people, but like, I don't know. Yeah, I think there's some opportunity for change in the future. And if anyone I know Tate listens to this, so it'll get back to him. But I hope others in the FKT organization.
Yeah, and I hope the people.
I hope it's positive.
And I never want the people who are the actual workers, the volunteers, and like Allison to ever feel. And I've had this conversation with Allison before when I've chatted in similar ways about FKT in the past, and like had presented some of these thoughts to her about like, hey, what about this idea of buying FKT back and making an FKT association that's nonprofit and da-da-da-da-da. And I've like had to communicate with her. It's like, in no way am I saying this is you doing a bad job, but there's this whole structure around you that's disabling certain decisions from being made and like disempowering you as a great leader in the roles you're fulfilling, and sort of disempowering the community from really shaping this and growing this and having this be a bigger thing.
Right.
So yeah, I hope nobody who's a volunteer takes any of this as a jab at them, or Allison or any of them, because that's not what the direction we're coming at this. It's more how this feels like it ought to fit into the space, and it being a part of a corporate conglomerate doesn't feel that the right way.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. Like that's exactly, and Allison's an amazing human. Like Tate, so many people I've interacted with in the organization are incredible people, and they just want the best for it, But like you said, it's the governance structure for sure. Like, we'll see what happens, man. These
are the conversations we need to be having.
Maybe this drum stuff. I mean, listen, if you want real change, you got to break some eggs. So this might be one of the ways, you do it. Because I've talked to so many people and been in so many people's DMs about this, so it would be cool to see some change. All right, because I'm getting narrow on time here. I gotta pivot. Let's talk aliens. the Fermi paradox, all these things. I need to get your
Yeah,
take
right.
on all
Because
that.
which episode is this going to be for you?
This is gonna be 69, baby.
69, flipping it around and getting weird, getting freaky on episode 69.
It was between you and Tom Hooper. Tom Hooper had reached out before it, and he's like, "Let me be episode 69." So I'm sorry, Tom. Jason Hardrath.
Sorry, Tom. Beat you to the draw. You'll have to get episode 420.
That's right.
So yeah. I guess these are like existential considerations for the ultra athlete or for the mountaineer, right? Like stuff that runs through your head when you're in the middle of nowhere. The Fermi paradox. How did we get on this when we were chatting?
Did I talk? I might have asked you about aliens. I'm not really sure. I don't know. Usually in my closing questions, I'll ask about aliens. I don't think I did with you.
I think it might have been a little darker than that. I feel like maybe you and I were chatting, not on the mic, about
could have been.
We were chatting back and forth about just like humanity and the state of the US and the state of like the world and
shit was dark.
Yeah, it was a little dark, and it was like it finally came down. It was like, oh no, like I'm pretty clear on my resolutions on the Fermi paradox. It's like you look at humanity and you the Fermi paradox, for those who haven't considered it or are Googling it right now, it's this question of, if mathematically there's just I'll go ahead and use the word astronomical probability that other life should exist and have come into existence over the time that the universe has existed, then why haven't we made contact? And why haven't we been visited? Why don't we see any signs? And sort of the overwhelming consideration there is it that every life form that rises to a level of intelligence to be capable of, say, what we are currently doing, the level of development in societies and technology that we're currently at, always has the dispositions, because of what allowed them to survive in a much less resource abundant world and technology abundant world? Do they have the same drives and urges inside them that cause them to kill each other off with that great technology before they ever reach intergalactic or interplanetary travel? And it's like, you look down the barrel of the gun and it's like, is humanity actually going to make it? And even as like a college freshman, I was sitting there going, I don't think so. I don't think humanity is one of them that pulls it off. All those, space sci-fis about us, colonizing planets in other galaxies. I don't know. It doesn't kind of seem like it right now.
Are you familiar with like the great filters? So the great filter being like, all right, a population, let's say us, will reach a certain point, right? And then sorry, my dog's squeaking its toy. Basically a population will reach a certain level. I think for us, our great level, or our great filter, will probably be AI, in my opinion, at least I could be totally wrong on this, but it will reach a certain level where it'll either go one of two ways. It'll either be beneficial or it will completely destroy us. And I just think we are not ready for what's coming, dude. In my opinion, I think it will be the great filter. Will it destroy us? I hope not. That would suck. That wouldn't be so fun. I think humanity is a beautiful thing. I'm very pro-human. But I think I've just met so many people that, yes, are far more intelligent than I'll ever be, but it just seems so like arrogant with AI. Like where, this has to be the greatest thing ever, and it will be. Don't be so speciest. And like that kind of bothers me, because I'm like, like we're playing with fire here, right? Like I don't think people understand, and not that I actually do, but like I have several friends that are very high-end machine learning software engineers, and like they do quite a lot of stuff with machine learning. And like I just think people fail to understand like just how powerful AI is going to be when it does get unleashed on humanity. And like when I say powerful, meaning like let's say they ban TikTok, right? I think that happened already. Well, if AI was to be rolled out in the way that it probably will in the next 5 years, you could just go on your phone and just create TikTok. Like you could just ask AI, you could just ask ChatGPT to make you one, right? Like that power is so powerful that like you start to imagine the things that you can do with it, right? You can, for good and for bad. And it's like, I don't think us as people, like, dude, we could barely like figure out an election. We could barely figure out whatever, might as, and then like you have this level of power. Like we can't even deal with Instagram. What the hell makes you think is going to happen when we have this? So I'm not too excited for when that comes around in 5 years. And it's different for you because you're a teacher of children, man. Like kids now probably all have cell phones. Like it's not like when we were kids. It's a completely different ballgame, whether better or for worse. Makes you think. I don't know.
It's that's an interesting, right? This sort of you're getting at the edges of like AI and post-humanism, like considerations of so what happens when AI surpasses us, and you're of the firm conclusion, and I agree with you, AI will surpass us within the near future. 10 years at the longest, more likely within a 5-year window. And then it gets really interesting because then it's like, all right, if intelligence can exist outside of consciousness, if that intelligence is much greater than anything we could ever do, if we're now just, right, in essence, depending on how much it surpasses us by, whether it's a single order of magnitude or hundreds of orders of magnitude, we're essentially like little ants in comparison of what the computations we're capable of producing. And it can invent every great thing every human, the greatest humans who ever existed, ever would have invented in the snap of fingers. It can produce those ideas faster and better and execute on them better than any human being. So even the best of us, right? We as athletes like to think about the elite edge, right? We find ourselves inspired by great creators as well, usually great inventors as well, because it's like, oh yeah, that's greatness. I can see greatness. Great sees great. But what if all of those are irrelevant? Like even the best of us is absolutely irrelevant in what we're capable of producing. What's the point of being?
Yeah.
What is the value we can add? And right then I also think of this interesting spiral, since we're on existential considerations. Right. If so many humans are so willing to have handed away their attention and free choice to the addictions of video games and social media, Instagram, whatever, then when we're able to have entire worlds that can be spoken into existence, right? You just described speaking a new TikTok into existence.
Right.
That's not the limitation. You could speak an entire new virtual reality into existence where you have roles and importance and connection, and it can be so full on and connected, right? You think about interfaces. There's, what is that? Mind Link, whatever Elon's
Neuralink.
working on.
Yeah.
Neuralink, right? So if you're able to like create a world that's so real that it triggers and is addictive to the dopamine and the serotonin and the oxytocin, like you're able to trigger all of those things in a world, you can create meaning and purpose and a role. It's not that we're going to be subdued forcefully through war into the matrix. It's that we're going to willingly create our own matrix and walk right into it because there's nothing else we'd rather do.
Yeah. Oh, dude. That leads us straight to simulation theory, man. Like, I don't know. I've heard this thrown around a bunch. I actually just talked about this with a good buddy of mine recently, like about being in a simulation. And like, I've seen a lot of people be like, talk about the probability that's very high that we're already in one. And then we're just going to create, like, we'll just create one. And then like, it's like, think about it. Like, it's like that Rick and Morty episode where it's a simulation within a simulation within a simulation. It's kind of bananas. I don't know, dude. Like, it's like, and then so we have so many conflicting things right now. So like Google Gemini just came out with their new, their chip for quantum computing, right? And they talked about like how we would have never been able to do this calculation unless it was like literally pulling from alternate universes. And I know I botched that a little bit with the where it's pulling data from, but like basically to do the calculation, it's pulling from other computers and other universes, meaning that's proving that we're in a multiverse. So like, are we in a multiverse that's in a simulation, or are we just in a multiverse? Like, what the fuck? Like now we gone 3 levels deeper. Like what does that look like? I don't know. We're all over the place with this, but one thing I do want to get back to with AI before I jump back into the multiverse theory is I think that the part that just upsets me so much is like humans are so like humanity is such a beautiful thing, and like we're so full of creativity and all these great things. And I see like now on Instagram you see like all this like AI generated shit, and it's like, all right, what is that going to do for creators? But even more so, dude, like I had a good conversation with someone recently about, oh, it'll be like the printing press and it'll get rid of jobs, but people will find other jobs in AI. And I just find that to be so like not this is like not the case. And I think about this from an economic perspective. Like I don't think people actually understand that like once AI does become a thing, like you're going to have not just like $1 trillion corporations, but like multi-trillion-dollar corporations with multiple trillionaires. Okay. And then like make this like one step further. It's like it's a very bad thing for the economy in the sense where like the wealth will be truly segregated into different sections where like people like me and you, like normal people, like you will never be able to get above and beyond because the economy doesn't need us. The economy will just be focused on AI. So it'll be the first economy in the world where like it will just not need people for production, right? So it's like, where's that utility? That's just from a macroeconomic perspective. So it's like, what does that do to GDP? What is that like? This takes things like really to another level. So it's like, no, this is not just going to be like the printing press. Like it's just basically going to be the CEO and the computer. And it's like, well, what does that do to us? And that's why I get concerned, because from an economic perspective, I know how corporations work. Like it's like, let's just continue to push every year to make 10 to 15, 20% more, however much we can, until we fall off a cliff, right? Or until we have a decline, and then we lay off all our people and do the same thing over again. So yeah, I don't know. I think the way I see it is very negatively.
No, I mean, I would show a video each year to my health class back in 2012, 2013, 2014, when I still taught high school. And it was just this video that presented the idea of a virtual Socrates. And it was the idea of an AI system that was so much better at teaching that, it could out teach any human mentor, teacher, great figure, billionaire that ever lived. And so then it then went on to talk about the advancements that would happen, and how eventually it led to this place that you're describing of humans are obsolete and irrelevant. And right, that's a part of the consideration of this post-humanism existential crisis. Like, what is the point of being if we're irrelevant even to the necessity of our own existence, right? We're just able to live on the subsistence of what AI creates. And that forces us to wrestle then with what is the value. And I think this like fits in with like the simulation hypothesis, that the simulation theory of, does it make our choices meaningless or does it make them more precious? How do you navigate that idea, whether it is this post-humanism idea or the idea of like, what if it's all a simulation? And I mean, I've even heard the simulation thing like zoomed out. Like if you look at sort of like consciousness, and if you were to say that consciousness is trying to run all of the probabilities that can exist in the universe, and one of those probabilities is consciousness existing inside this conglomeration of atoms having this conversation with your conglomeration of atoms, but it's the energy and the flow and the consciousness of the universe like playing out all these possible variations, and we just happen to be one of those variations. And we kind of get ourselves out of being the center of our own reality, so to speak. We bump ourselves out, and it's like, oh, this is all just flowing and happening. And AI is just like one of those other flowings of intelligence and consciousness that we played a role in bringing it to be. But now it goes on. And how do we then wrestle with our existence continuing as we're faced with this much bigger world around us? And I think, right, that's always been around us in some ways. But we're able to ignore it and be like, no, we're the most important thing making all these breakthroughs. And because of that, I have value. Because I'm doing these exceptional things, I deserve X amount of extra that other people don't have. How do we navigate a world where people still have hungers and dreams and needs, where they can't actually create any necessary relevant value.
Yeah.
There's no
That's
breakthrough they can create anymore that hasn't already been surpassed by a higher intelligence. And we're like face to face with that higher intelligence. So we don't get to pretend it's not real. How do we then have a sense of value? How do we place that and navigate that? And I think that's something we're going to be forced to wrestle with
yeah.
in the near future, is like, how do we navigate human subsistence and all of that in the
Like
face of things that make it seem meaningless?
like we're very much achieving people, right? Like we want to, and this is like, I mean, most people like want to, they don't want to just like it's like the carrot on the stick, right? It's like you want to achieve in some way, shape, or form. You want to be fulfilled. It doesn't matter.
Well, and you want that carrot to represent, right, kind of something you did to get the carrot.
Right.
Right. You want like those of us wired this way, we like want it to have meant, right? We thrive on exceptionalism. We thrive on merit.
Mhm.
Like we want there to be merit behind, right? That's why like high level athletes take issue when a seemingly lower level athlete who's an influencer gets a bigger paycheck than them, because they're like, but I run faster. I'm more exceptional.
This is true.
They're slower than me. And so we want pay to be evenly matched to merit. And you could argue that, well, the creator's adding a whole something that athlete's ignoring, and so that's actually what they're getting paid extra for, is that they put all this work in a place that the athlete ignored. But that's still another form of merit. Like, oh, well, this person, well, now you can't produce AI like videos to keep up with the AI, so now your merit is lost too, right? There's nothing you can do that's of any merit comparatively, and it's really interesting for people like us to navigate, where essentially we're beaten at every game. There's nothing we can actually do that an AI can't just do better 1,000 times over in 1,000 different places in a split second.
Right. And really quick, I do want to stop for one thing. So like all those listening that like are losing their minds right now because like, oh, the medical breakthroughs it'll provide. Sure, 100%. I think AI is super productive up until a certain point. And like when I say that, like we can use it for open heart surgeries, to diagnose cancers, to do all of these amazing things, vaccines, you name it. There's all different amazing things you can do with it. But that said, it's productive to a point.
Well, you run into the problem of Universe 25, right? So let's say, oh, it's great, it's alleviating suffering, it's saving more lives. It's like, okay, that's now more lives that have to wrestle with this existence of what is my meaning, what is my purpose. And Universe 25 is this experiment that they ran with rats, and rats do have a hierarchical role-based society that they live in. And so they built this carrying capacity within this habitat that was quite large. But the problem they continually ran into in the experiment was that the social roles ran out before the carrying capacity was full. And so these seemingly, I guess you could say, ostracized, purposeless, role-less, listless rats would then do things to sabotage and bring down the society. Not that this sounds like anything we've heard before in our own society. So the issue we're faced with, and maybe this is one of the answers for how we can reframe the thinking around human value, human to human value, within this sort of emerging frontier, is what really seems to matter most to keep society functioning is for people to have meaningful roles to step into, where what they do matters. It has influence, it has importance to some number of people around them. They carry a burden for a certain people. They show up for a certain people. Those certain people show up for them and they care about it. There's some community, but within that community, not just being in the community and sitting there, but having a role within that community where, oh, it matters that I do this. People look up to me for this. That's one of the most important things. And right now we attach all of that to incomes, right? Our employers, or if we're, self-employed, like we hold our own value tied to whatever makes us money oftentimes. Like this is what my role is. And I always argue to people that I notice that those two are interlaced with each other. It's like, no. My role and purpose is to speak aha moments and breakthroughs to people. And I just so happen to do that in schools most frequently to pay my bills, but I can do it anywhere. And as long as I'm creating aha moments and breakthroughs for the people who are around me and willing to listen, and it's helping them move forward and see their reality more clearly and navigate their life with more purpose, then I'm living lined up with my role. I'm adding my value. I see that, and that's what matters. And making sure, I think it's really important, especially with what's coming, to unmarry how you see your personal value and role in the world from what's making you money. Because I think pretty soon those are going to get forcefully unmarried for all of us.
Oh, for sure.
And it's going to be like, oh, you really need to know who you're adding value to and what that value is and why you care about that. Aside from what does or doesn't make you money. And you need to be able to see that clearly, and that to be able to be powerful enough in your own mental model of reality to be something you're able to guide your life decisions with. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been wrestling with this stuff, and a lot of times, people could spiral off the deep end and get into some really dark thoughts. And then, people look at that happy-go-lucky, like encourager, stoker, psych builder, go for your dreams. It's like, oh, well, how's this guy simultaneously holding thoughts like this of like, yeah, humanity's not a species that probably makes it, and like all of these considerations of our irrelevance in the face of these bigger things. And I think, right, you get this a bit from the mountains, like sense of place, your own sort of insignificance, but also the significance within just being in the moments you're in. And I think I've also been overwhelmed with sort of the essence of the spirits of things, right? The spirit of exploration, the spirit of competition, and how powerful these guiding forces. And this is as close to a spirituality as I think I get to, really, is this idea that there are these spirits of things, good or bad, right? You could get guided, you could get grabbed and pulled into the spirit of hatred and the spirit of revenge and become animated. And that's the thing that all your energy and attentions, but you can also get animated and pulled into these positive, beautiful things that put you in an upward spiral instead of a downward spiral. And right, I think that is one of our roles as human beings, is to sort of rescue wisdom from the past and to be aware of the spirit we're indwelled by, what's grabbed us, what has us, what gives us motivation for living. We're both having this conversation because we love steep stuff. We love getting out in the mountains and ripping hard. That gives us a sense of value and purpose. Well, we ought to be doing things that invite others into that journey, that invite others into that upward spiral, that inspire others to partake of the things. And it won't be everybody. Maybe it's just the other PE milers that like running hard. But that's somebody that needs talked to, because those people can spiral hard, right? If they don't have that thing or don't feel it's important for them to direct their attention and start to self-soothe with alcohol or other drugs because they can't find meaning, it's like, hey, I could see that in myself if I wasn't doing these things, if I wasn't chasing these big dreams and growing and looking at frontier adventure as a big part of my life. And right, I think that's how we sit up against the inevitable heat death of the universe, bring another existential crisis into it, right? If everything is going to end, it's all, even AI, all of it's just going to cease to exist. And this is one of like the beautiful things to confront. So no matter what we do, even if you make the most positive ripples that echo on through all of humanity for the rest of time, somehow you live this beautiful value-driven life and it echoes for all of time, even that life and light gets extinguished. And so how then do you wrestle with your inner world to arrive at a place that it's still worth doing what you're aimed at and still worth making the impact you have, even in the light of it not mattering in eternity? And I think it comes down to, and I think this is kind of embedded in some wisdoms of Eastern philosophy, and embedded, even if you look at Western religions a bit, and you read it in the right way. We either make heaven on earth here, or we make hell on earth here. And that happens with the decisions we make, and we can see how it affects the people around us, whether the people around us are happy and inspired and living dreams and making awesome things happen and having high senses of well-being, or are they spiraling into disorder and dysfunction and anguish and pain and suffering? Are they able to handle the tragedies life throws at them with higher values of courage and honor and to be able to seek solitude and to be consoled in a group of friends, like all of these rich human experiences that can be positive? or the terrible ones? And what is it we're inviting people into? And it's like in the here and now, we can find value in the roles we have with the people around us. And I think in a way, that's how I navigate all of this, like big picture, back down to the small picture, back down to the life I'm living. Like, why does it matter?
Yeah.
Why am I still showing up and having these conversations? Why do I still go on my frontier adventures, even though I'm not the fast guy and I've lost a beat or two because long COVID hit me hard? Why am I chasing inspiring people into new sports? Like, why doesn't this guy just quit? Why doesn't he shut up? Well, if I can put a few more people before the end of my time on an upward spiral where they live a rich and inspired life, it's all worth it.
Dude, I love it. That's beautiful. I think this is a good place to stop. Dude, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This is a beautiful conversation. We got to have many more. I think we need to do a part 2 or a part 3. We could keep this going. I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much for coming on, and let's do this again.
Yeah, let's talk again, James. Good chatting.
Dude, thank you so much. What'd you guys think? Oh man, what a fun episode. This one was a well-contested episode. I feel like there's going to be some strong opinions one way or another based on what we talked about for influencers versus athletes, as well as our thoughts on FKT. Although I will say for the FKT conversation, I feel like everybody can agree. Potentially Fastest Known Time might do a heck of a lot better if it was under different ownership and potentially a nonprofit. I don't know. You guys write to me. You let me know what you think. And if anyone's interested in continuing that conversation, I'd be happy to have you on the podcast to continue the conversation and keep things moving along there. Guys, before you get going, I just really want to thank Jason so much for coming on. Let's get on Instagram. If you don't already follow Jason, give him a follow. That's going to be at Jason Hardrath. You can find him on Instagram. It's going to be linked in the show notes. In addition, there is going to be a video that I'm going to be linked to in YouTube for Jason's latest project down in Chile for the Ojos de Salada, which I just probably butchered that terminology or pronunciation, for the volcano that they did that was super high. And yeah, super cool. Guys, I hope you enjoy this one. Before you get going, do me a favor. If you're interested in a pack or if you need a new belt, new water bottle, flask, you name it, Ultimate Direction's got you covered. If you guys hop on over to ultimatedirection.com and type in code SteepStuffPod, that's going to get you 25% off your cart. Very, very last but not least, if you guys enjoyed this episode, it would mean the absolute world to me if you guys could give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. That's how we can continue to cover this great sport and have these amazing conversations and highlight the profiles of these amazing athletes. Guys, I have a locked and loaded week coming for you. We have another episode dropping with none other than Mr. Francesco Sanseri. That's right, the brother of Michelino has come on the podcast, and that's going to be dropping this week. In addition to the Alaskan badass Miss Denali Strabel, the third place finisher at the Rut 20 AK in 2024, an Alaskan mountain runner who's finished on the podium numerous times at Mount Marathon. Denali is a breath of fresh air, an amazing conversation I had with her, and I'm so excited for that one to drop on Friday. So we've got a jam-packed week of podcasts for you guys. Stay tuned. I hope you enjoy it, and buckle up.